Rome, the long story of a city. Rome did not enter the stage of history as an empire. The most important thing that made it strong was not that it was powerful from the very beginning. On the contrary, Rome's story began with fragility. Founded on the banks of the Tiber River in a region surrounded by marshes, this city stood in the shadow of greater civilizations around it. The Etruscans were more advanced. The Greek cities were wealthier. Carthage ruled the seas. Rome, meanwhile, was simply a community trying to survive. Yet from the very beginning, Rome had a distinct characteristic: its ability to adapt. Rather than destroying its enemies, Rome learned to absorb them. Defeated communities were not completely erased. They were turned into part of Rome. Languages, gods, and traditions slowly blended together. Rome did not grow as a single culture, but as a mixture. Myths and reality. Rome explained its own origins through myths. Twin brothers, a wolf, and divine destiny. But these myths did not exist to write history. They existed to hold society together. Because from its earliest days, Rome understood this. What keeps a society standing is not only the sword, but meaning. As Rome's story was told, reality and myth became intertwined, and this reflected Rome's character, a society that was realistic, yet in need of symbols. Kings and the problem of trust. Rome was once ruled by kings, but kingship was never considered sacred in Rome. When a king was expelled, the problem was not only the removal of one man, the problem was the concentration of power in a single hand. This experience left a deep mark on Rome, and never again was absolute authority in a single ruler fully trusted. The fall of the monarchy was not a revolution for Rome, but a trauma. This trauma shaped Roman politics for centuries. The Republic, a system built on balance. The Republic in Rome was not an ideal system. It was deliberately designed to be imperfect. Power was divided. Authority was temporary. No one was indispensable. There were two consuls, so that if one made a mistake, the other could stop him. There was a Senate, so that the anger of the people would not become uncontrolled. There were popular assemblies, so that the aristocracy could not rule alone. This system was slow. It was complex, and it constantly produced conflict. But precisely for that reason, it worked. Who were the people of Rome? The Roman people were not a single group. The rich, the poor, old families, newcomers. Yet in Rome, the people were not completely silent. They knew how to take to the streets. They had learned how to act collectively. Many rights in Roman history were not granted as favors. They were taken by force. Debt crises erupted, land disputes emerged, the state became paralyzed, and each time the system was forced to change. Roman politics was not an ideal democracy, but it was in a constant state of negotiation. Citizenship, Rome's strongest weapon. Rome's most revolutionary idea was not the sword, it was citizenship. Rome did not exclude everyone in the lands it conquered. On the contrary, it admitted people under certain conditions. This process was slow, and it was not always fair. But in the long run, it made Rome stronger, because Roman armies were not made up only of mercenaries, but of people who believed in the system itself. Expansion and conflict. As Rome grew, its contradictions grew with it. Institutions designed for a city now had to govern a world power. Commanders became wealthy. Soldiers tied their loyalty not to the state, but to individuals. War spoils corrupted the system. The rich grew richer. The poor lost their land. The republic was still standing, but it was beginning to hollow out from within. The slow gathering of power. The empire in Rome was not established in a single day. There was no coup. There was no coronation scene. Powers were first granted as temporary. Then they were extended a little longer. Eventually, they became indispensable. People accepted this in the name of preserving order. And one day, the republic was still there. But decisions were now coming from a single center. The paradox of Rome. Rome emerged from the idea of freedom, but it grew too large to be governed by freedom alone. Rome set out with the idea of equality, but it lived with inequality. Rome wanted order, yet order centralized power. Even Rome's collapse cannot be explained by a single cause for this reason, because Rome was never simple. Why is it still discussed? What makes Rome special is not the wars it won. On the contrary, it is the questions it asked. How should power be shared? How much voice should the people have? Does the state protect the individual, or does the individual protect the state? Rome did not give clear answers to these questions, but it asked them on this scale for the first time, and these questions still remain relevant today. Don't forget to subscribe to truly understand history and follow the trace of humanity.